Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fundamentalists podcast. My name is Elliott Morgan, and I am here with one of my favorite people in the world, guys, Dr. Peter Rollins. Today, we're going to be talking about freedom. In previous episodes, we've been talking about things like postmodernism and the idea of privacy and what was going on with Barbie. Underlying all of those is another question. What is even freedom? How is it? What do you do with it? What can you do? Is it even real? Are you free? Is not everything every one of us does always precipitated by a bunch of other things that led to it, thereby negating the very possibility that we have any agency over our lives? I don't know. These are the fun, lighthearted questions we like to explore here on this show. It's a kids program, and we're hoping to sell it to Sesame Street at some point. Pete, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing well. What do you think about freedom? Here's the thing. Or do you where's your intuition? Or even you can tell me about what you used to think, even.
What a fun synchronicity, Pete, because I know you love synchronicities. I was just going to say we should do a topic on, or an episode on intuition soon. My brain, when you originally brought up freedom, to our American conception of freedom and how we very much obsess over it, but it's a weird kind of freedom. I think it's sometimes a very limited kind of freedom. It's not an internal freedom, free from the, as you might say, contradictions inside. It's more of a freedom about what bumper stickers to put on your car or what seatbelts to wear and that kind of thing, and that's fine. But I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit of a shallow version of freedom. I like a different kind of freedom. I like the freedom that like Viktor Frankl talks about, in his book, or the kind of inner for the Martin Luther King, the people in prison when they find that inner freedom. That's what gets my blood flowing. But I think you're talking about free will.
Mm-hmm. I
just put together the title of Free Willy is a play on free will.
Oh, is it? No.
I mean, is it? I mean, they're freeing Willy. It's Free Willy.
Yeah, maybe you know what? I never know. That could be the reason, actually. Yeah, I never thought of it.
Anyway, I appreciate you asking, Pete. But what do you think?
That's your profound thought for the podcast?
Hang on.
Hey, hold on a second. That's all about freedom and determinism. Predestination.
Free will. Yeah, he's meant to be free, or he's bound to be. Oh, goodness. Anyway, yeah. SeaWorld sucks. All right. What do you think of Free Willy, Pete?
Yeah, well, one of the things you're talking about is in philosophy is often called negative freedom, which is the idea that what freedom means is that you are able to act on your desires. So Schopenhauer would say you're not free to choose your desires, but freedom at a social or political level is when you're able to enact the desires that you have. And that's one way that people try to reconcile it, is they go, okay, we're all determined. What we do is to do with internal biological factors and external factors, and there's a big, massive web of cause and effect. But if we're able to do what we want, then, so you're only an incel if you want to have sex, right? So, if you don't want to have sex, you're not an incel, because your desire and your activity are at one. So you're
voluntary celibate.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And so even if you're a prisoner and you're able to enjoy your prison cell, you're able to fully almost countersign it and go, I don't even want to go out. You could say, well, that person is free. They're not constrained. So yeah, that's negative freedom, but I think that's a very weak form of freedom.
Those are always the best. Those are always the scariest characters in prison movies and prison shows, when you meet the prisoner who loves being in there and he always runs the place, or she, if it's Orange is the New Black or something like that. Yeah. But those are the people that you get like, oh, this is their world. This is their whole. They thrive. They were meant to be here. This is where they found who they really are, and it's like, oh, that's cool. I like that. That's a fun character.
And it's like, in some ways, you could say that to countersign necessity is a form of freedom. So if, for example, you are paralyzed, there's a certain sense in which if you're able to embrace that reality, you're free. You kind of, so it's, you can't, but then there's an argument that we should fight against our constraints. So, and freedom is precisely whenever you fight against necessity. So that's another way of arguing about it, is that freedom is precisely when, for example, during the Second World War, if you were in France during the Nazi occupation, freedom would precisely be the experience of not accepting the constraints of society and fighting against the occupation. So, so freedom is, although that's still fighting for your desire. Your desire is emancipation. So I guess freedom is not giving ground to your desire. Freedom is embracing your desire.
Well, you lost me a little bit, so I'm gonna need some simple. Can you compare this, use the plot of Free Willy to describe what you just said?
Unfortunately, I have never.
So if
watched
you're
Free Willy.
Willy,
yeah.
Well, you get the idea that there's a Willy that's a whale that's gotta get out of there.
Yes. So yes, exactly. So Willy is not free to choose his desire, right? He wants to escape.
Yeah.
He doesn't choose that. That's kind of his nature, is to escape and be free in the ocean. So he is determined. However, if he is able to escape the confines of the park, he would be free in the negative way.
He'd be free in the negative way because then he'd be free to do whatever he wanted. But then all of a sudden his freedom would be defined by his desires now. So his freedom is only as far as he's like, well, now what do I do now that I'm free? That kind of thing.
Because he's constrained by his instincts. So technically, at a metaphysical level, Willy's not free. He's going to be constrained by his instincts to eat certain foods, to mate, to do all of these things. He's not free to choose those things, but he's free to actually enact them. So he probably can't eat what he wants when he's in the park. So it should be called Negative Free Willy. That should be the sequel.
Well, first of all, the sequel is called Free Willy 2.
Okay.
I thought they were going to go with Freer Willy, but they did not. And yours is a good one.
Yeah. Because you could do a Freudian reading of the title. I mean, that's a philosophy, but Free Willy, there's definitely a Freudian reading there as well.
Yeah. I think that's been done. I'm pretty sure I've seen. I don't know if they called it Freudian or if it's more of a Saturday Night Live kind of thing, but yeah, it's definitely. It's what I say when I'm being intimate. I say, okay, time to Free Willy.
Time to Free Willy.
So this negative freedom that now. I have a loose grasp on what you're talking about. How does this relate to those who go there's no such thing as free will? So if you say there's no such thing as free will, or you come to that conclusion, and then you're like, so that's your tank. Your Free Willy tank. Your lack of free will is it doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna be stuck in this thing. It's hopeless, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you accept that, when you go, this is, I have no free will, then you would maybe be able to enjoy your tank a little bit. This sounds depressing. I'm getting depressed. I feel like still we should free will it. Yeah.
Well, this idea that, metaphysically, and actually the animal is a very good example because the whale or the monkey or whatever, they have instincts. So whenever you look at a dog or a cat, you're less likely to think that the dog has any metaphysical freedom, any sense in which the dog is acting outside of conditioning, instincts, training, etc., etc. So that, and that's generally what first year philosophy people think. So I think actually our standard first position is everybody thinks, well, of course we're free. Of course I choose if I want a tea or a coffee, or if I want to go out with somebody or not go out with somebody, or if I choose a job or choose what exams to do, that yes, I'm choosing those. I'm not constrained, I'm not forced to choose them. So I think that's the standard common sense position that I think most people start with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. I think so. I think because that's the common sense thing. And here's the big thing: is we experience ourselves as free. I mean, we'll get into this in a minute. Is that experience real? But we experience ourselves as free. Do you know about the experiment that was done and has been replicated, where you kind of wire somebody up and you can notice that when somebody performs an act, they perform the act before the brain decides to do it. So basically what the brain is doing is it's rationalizing the act that you're going to do. So we experience it as I'm choosing to pick up this coffee cup and I'm choosing to drink the coffee. But it seems like what's really happening is you are bodily reaching out to this coffee cup without any consciousness going on. And then very quickly, almost immediately, your consciousness goes, oh, I wanted to do that. And
we gotta write a script real quick.
Yes. I mean,
come up with why we did that.
Yeah, I mean, this has been known for a long time. I think it was Freud did these experiments, but where you could hypnotize somebody, get them to do something like put an umbrella up inside, and then you take them out of hypnosis and you ask them why they did it. They will give you rationalizations. So instead of going like I was forced to by hypnosis, they're going, oh, I wanted to test the umbrella to see if it was working. Right.
That's very funny. I love that stuff. It reminds me of when you walk into a room and you're like, oh, I have no idea why I'm in here, and then it's like, who was that was walking around that so purposefully walked into this bedroom?
That's kind of the truth. What's happened there is we're always doing that, but usually your brain is really quick to make a reason up, and whenever it doesn't, you kind of go like, what am I doing here? It's like your brain has let you down.
Stop! Oh crap! Sorry. Toilet paper.
Yes.
So okay, all right, I'm following you so far. I like where this is going. This is nice. So you got the common sense approach, and then you have the actual recognition that it's actually not quite as common sense as it might seem.
Yes, which is the negation. So if the first position is affirmation, there is freedom, then usually when people think about it for a bit and they read a bit of philosophy, then they go into the negation and they say, well, hold on a second, that doesn't make sense. What would it mean to make a free decision that's not influenced by socioeconomic conditions, by instincts, by biology, by conditioning? If I'm choosing between tea and coffee, a billion, like an infinite number of things had to happen so that I only have that decision of tea and coffee. All of these contingent things happen to bring that to me. And also then all of my conditioning and my taste and my desire and what coffee or tea symbolizes, all of that is in the background. And so basically freedom is a user's illusion. We might think we're free, but everything's caught in cause and effect. Everything in science is basically seems to show that there is nothing that happens that is outside the chain of cause and effect, including our mental faculties.
You had me right up until the end, but I appreciate what you're saying. Because you may feel that way, but I'm incredibly free. First of all.
Yeah.
But yeah, cause and effect, because it is hard to. You can't. It is, I think, overwhelming when you do that thing where, for me, it'll happen with a particular brand, not even strand, and I will sometimes partake in it, and then as I sit there and I think, I'm like, wait a minute, every single thing I've ever done has been a result of the other things that happened before it. And so what I'm doing right now is a result of everything. And when you zoom out, you're like, well, that means everything I'm ever going to do is a result of what I just did. And that's depressing.
Yeah.
So we're back to Free Willy and needing and wanting to Free Willy.
Yes. I mean, yeah, no, it is. Like, I think whenever you think about it like that at first, you can feel...
When you're high, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like dropping into an abyss.
Yeah. And everything you do, like every act you do, you're like, oh shit, that was predetermined. Like everything is predetermined from the very start of time. There was a famous French scientist, I think Laplanche. I can't remember what his name was, but he basically said that if we know everything about the position of every kind of atom in the universe and its velocity, like if we knew all of that and we had an infinite processing ability, we could know everything about the past, the present, and the future. Like everything is just, a play of these forces.
It's like a clock, and the clock is, you set the clock in motion,
Yeah.
then all the little pieces moving together, it'll keep the time.
Yes.
Because you put them all together, and if you have a big enough clock, you can just go like, oh, or a big enough computer, you can say, yeah, you can calculate anything. I don't subscribe to that, but I'm sure that that's probably true. But there's plenty of things that are true that I don't subscribe to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the in the in the last 100 years, or 50 years, or 100 years, the one of the areas of science that has maybe opened this up again a little bit is the realm of physics and quantum mechanics, because what seems to appear, what's called, as like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, is that there is a type of proto-existence of wave oscillations, these oscillations and these superpositions, and it's all probability based. And when you measure a subatomic particle, when you actually measure it with equipment, you crunch it into reality. It goes from this kind of virtual proto-reality into reality, and you can measure it. But before you measure it, it exists in this realm of possibility. And so that
Another
initially,
do not recommend this episode again if you're high.
yeah. Yes.
Because that's the other abyss. The other side of
Yeah.
it is, either way, there's an abyss. You fall backwards into the abyss of determinism, or you fall forward into the abyss of non-determinist quantum physics stuff. And either way, you're going to be needing to hold on to the ground.
Yeah, it is
To
going
tell
to
yourself.
it's going to mess you up.
Yes.
So do you know that woman? Do you ever watch her, Sabine Hossenfield? I forget.
No.
I'm going to look up her name so I get this right. I watch quite a lot of her on YouTube. She's quite good. She does a channel called Science Without the Gobbledygook. She's called
Nice.
Sabine Hossenfelder, if I'm pronouncing her name right. Sabine Hossenfelder. She is very interesting, but she advocates what's called superdeterminism, which is some physicists who kind of say, well, actually, this might look like at the quantum level there is this world of virtuality and possibility, and where everything isn't determined, but that is just because we haven't found a more fundamental basis. And so superdeterminists will basically say, well, the instrument that you measure the subatomic particle with, they are connected in some way, and we haven't quite got down to the next fundamental level to understand how they're connected, but they are connected. So that's kind of that's the return of classical physics in the world of quantum mechanics.
That's people who love the Newtonian model of the universe. Like, no, you just haven't found the billiard ball yet. The billiard ball is somewhere. We just don't know where it is.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of going back to Einstein, who said God doesn't play dice. It's like, yeah, it's trying to kind of get back to that in some way. But here's
boring.
And
no, thank you.
Yes, and this is where, because I am a philosopher of freedom. I believe in freedom. So what I want to say to these super determinists is, so someone like Sabine would say that there is objective reality and everything is determined, and then we have this subjective illusion. It kind of is very similar to this New Age kind of thinking, that there's a veil of illusions, and behind the veil of illusions there is this substantive reality. So similar language, but there's subjectivity is this illusion that distorts our objective reality. So it's an illusion that we kind of have to try to dissipate, so that we can see that behind this illusion is really just a play of cause and effect. And I would argue that, yeah. Oh, go ahead. What do you think of that?
This reminded me of the Kripal's understanding of, like, basically the same thing. What is it? Dual aspect monism, where everything is essentially one, and then your ego, the human experience is such that we split this monism, and we fracture it, and so we experience the world not as it is. But it's still that way. But we experience it as what does he say? I have the quote somewhere, but it's like a something. Epistemological dualism sits perfectly fine within an ontological monism, or something like that.
Okay,
like
and
everything is this way, but we appear when we see it, when we experience it, our brains filter such that we, see. This is why you're better. It's also earlier for me, so.
Oh yeah.
Well, does that make sense?
You're saying it's
sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering, is that his position, or is that what he is just articulating? Because
I believe that's his position, but maybe it's not. I don't know if he was just describing it or what he was talking. This was in, I think, the Super Humanities, his newer book, but I don't know. I don't remember.
I would guess, from the little I know of him, I would guess that would be his position, but I don't know enough. But yeah, that's exactly that. Is that there's different versions of it, and Spinoza maybe a version, but the idea is that there is this monism, this substantive reality, and subjectivity is a type of distortion that creates the illusion of a dualism, of a subject and object. But that is, yes, that's a kind of what can be called a user's illusion. Now, I want to say something slightly different to that, which is, and I think that basically what superdeterminists mean is they say, well, this illusion of subjectivity is a distortion that is kind of like it's part of who we are. We can't get rid of it. It's a distortion. But I think the answer to this is to say, well, that is freedom. Freedom is precisely the distortion in objectivity that prevents objectivity from being fully objective. Like that is the definition of freedom. Freedom isn't substantial. Freedom is precisely a type of nothing that has to be taken into consideration when we look at reality.
I didn't understand quite, I don't think. You're saying that the objective reality that exists behind this veil of illusions, to mix up all the language, it is itself not entirely objective, because how could it be when within it is the broken and fractured perceptions, or the user illusion, basically?
I want to say that
therefore
basically
it taints.
No, I want to say the illusion is part of objective reality. The illusion is not something that merely gets in the way of objective reality. Illusion is part of the very nature of objective reality. You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of the illusion without getting rid of objective reality as well.
Okay, cool. All right.
I can give some examples. It's a complicated idea, and we might have to. And I can give a couple of examples maybe to make it easier. But it's basically said that the very obstacle to objectivity is an inherent part of it. So I think a simple way of understanding this is in relation to language. That language is made up of a whole string of signifiers, of words, and each word points to other words. And so every word is in a system of cause and effect. Every word points to other words. But within language, there is an exception to that, and this is called the master signifier. The master signifier is a word that strangely seems to lack meaning. And so a master signifier can be a word like justice or freedom or God. And what a master signifier is it's a word that corrals a whole mode of discourse. So there's all this writing around, say, the word freedom. But there's a sense in which we can never fully define the word freedom. The very word that holds all of this discourse together, there's an element of it that defies description, that defies definition. But the definement, that which defies definition, is part of language. It's actually, in fact, without a master signifier, you would not have language. So there is a type of something missing in language. That's why we can never fully say what we want to say. We have to find different ways of saying things. We never just write one book and say, oh, that's it. There's something in language that's missing, but the part that's missing is part of language. it is, and if you don't take cognizance of the missing part within language, you can't understand language, and the missing part is called freedom. That's what I would say.
That is quite different, Pete, than what Webster defines freedom as, which is so much more boring. It is the quality or state of being free. When you look up a definition of a word, and the definition is a word that's in the word, like freedom is the state of being free, or democracy is the noun version of to be democratic. That infuriates me. It also tells you nothing. The absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint in choice or action, liberation from slavery or restraint, or from the power of another, or simply independence. Oh, what is freedom? It means independence. You look up independence, what's it going to say? Eventually, you're going to get right back to freedom, aren't you? But they constellate these things. Why is it necessary? Like, why do we need these big words that we're always talking around but never getting at, that where they cluster and constellate all of these different other ideas? Is it like a Big Bang thing? Is that like the source of the other words? Like, where does this all, why is it what makes it a master signifier?
Yeah, so like the pre-linguistic understanding of language is that words refer to things. So when I say rock, it refers to a thing out there that's a rock, And in that understanding of language is what you described. It kind of, you go back far enough, and it's like somebody made a sound, like that sounded like a thud, that maybe was the sound of hitting a rock, and so that was the original signifier that was like came from an encounter with the world. And so that notion is that there is at the core of all language, there is something substantive. But with Saussure and with linguistics, that theory, that kind of common sense theory, is very hard to substantiate. That's, in fact, I mean, there's still some people who believe in it, but I think it's very hard to substantiate. I actually think believed in it.
Yeah. Have you heard the idea that all of it, that most language starts from the body, like body metaphors?
Oh no, tell me more about that.
That's all I know. But I didn't subscribe to it because I don't subscribe to things that are true, but a lot of things anyway. But it is like, I don't forget what it was, or maybe it was McGilchrist talking about it. He went really far into it. But the idea that, metaphors are always eventually tied back to the body. So you taste, you grasp something, you understand it. It's like the posture of the body, parts of the body, actions of the body, and that's where we have all of these words from.
And yes, that is, and I would kind of disagree with that, but I understand that's a good example of this, is that the idea that language at some basic point gets back to either something physical out in the world or to our bodies, that there's a substantive basis to the signifier. That's a position, and as I say, it is a Jungian position to some extent. I think Jung kind of took to that.
That makes sense.
Kind of like the Saussurean idea that actually language is all it is a chain of signifiers that relate to other signifiers. It doesn't anchor in anything solid. In fact, at its very core, there is an absence, and that's what the master signifier is that that language at its very core has not a bodily origin, but an origin in nothingness itself. Which is called freedom.
Okay. When you say Saussurean, that is what Tolkien. That's like the big book that Tolkien wrote after or before Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know the exact joke I'm trying to make, but what is that book that he wrote?
I know it's the Saurinian or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Oh man, sorry folks, I'm not a Tolkien person, but okay. So yes, Peter Rollins believes that something is based in nothingness, but that's okay.
Yes, that's exactly it.
To summarize,
nothingness is created by something. That's the That's the
The
key.
nothingness is created by something. Okay. So it's not something out of nothing. It's nothing out of something.
Exactly. That's what I would argue. I would argue that it's yes. That's beautifully said. Actually, you have to use that. Yes, it's not. It's not something out of nothing. It's nothing out of something. So, in other words, language both creates something that it can't name, and also then is created by that. So this is very postmodern. Whenever we did postmodernism recently. So Derrida talks a lot about this. Like he would say that when we use a word like justice, that's a word made up by humans, and we put meaning to it. We write books about it, but also by writing about it, there's something that we never quite name. There's a crack. There's something missing. So the more you write about justice, and the more articulate you get, also there's something that remains unsaid in the word, something that cannot be nailed down. And that's an inherent, necessary part of language.
Yeah.
People don't like, I mean, there's a desire to kind of make language completely, to turn language into communication, basically, to make language into something that says exactly what you want it to say. But I would say that's language by definition includes something that is missing. And to call it something is wrong because it's a nothing. It contains a nothing that that animates it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Dan McClellan guy that we've mentioned before, and I like his stuff, but he'll talk about the Bible as a Bible scholar of the Bible, and he is very adamant about saying things like the text itself has no meaning. This words don't have meaning. We give them meaning. We interpret them in a particular way. And we negotiate basically with the text, and there's all these factors involved, and so you want to basically go with who is negotiating in a way that is the, I guess most most accurate. I'm probably putting words in his mouth. You probably wouldn't say that, but is that kind of what you're getting at? It just sounds like a very postmodern idea of just going, no, none of this means we give it. It's all like make believe a little bit.
Yes, and then what I want to add to that to make it kind of solid, because I'm not being a postmodernist myself. I want to say, but that we can give a name to this. So in other words, it's not simply that everything's kind of relative. It's that we can name this dimension, and master signifier is one of the names for it in languages. But it's given different names in different disciplines. So wave particle duality, or the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, is the name for it in physics. So we can name this oscillation. And actually, the word God is traditionally one of the signifiers. It signifies something that cannot be signified. So, like, one of the most basic definitions of God is from Anselm, who says, God is that than which none greater can be conceived. But basically, to unpack what he means, he says God is a signifier for something that cannot be signified. So it is.
God is the name of the blanket you put over the mystery to give it a shape, said Barry Taylor, as referenced in Pete Holmes' newest comedy special.
I was talking to Barry yesterday. He was in Belfast. We were having a coffee, and he just got a text through, and it was somebody holding his book up. He said, "Oh yeah, Pete Holmes mentioned me," and I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, Pete Holmes had a special, and he mentioned me in it." Like, no way, that's crazy.
Yeah, was Barry wearing a Pete Holmes t-shirt and a Pete Holmes hat and a Pete Holmes jacket with a little picture of Pete Holmes on it?
Well, here, tell me what did you actually watch it? Did you see it?
Yes, I do watch comedy sometimes. He goes in quite detailed. I had somebody reach out to me and say like, you should check out Pete Holmes' newest special because he mentions Barry Taylor, and I was like, oh cool. And sure enough, he literally references Barry and says he was like a roadie for AC/DC. He says he's this really great guy, and then he says what Barry said, which is God's the name of the blanket that you put over the mystery to give it a shape, or something like that. And then he goes at the very end, I won't spoil it, but it is definitely a solid mention. I think I would be very excited if I was Barry, and I was also very happy for him because I was like, yeah, Barry's wonderful. So it was cool to see him pop up in that way.
That's amazing because Barry's one of the good guys, and he is the least. I mean, one of the issues Barry has, and don't think he'll mind me saying, is he does the least self promotion of anyone I know
Yeah.
in the world. I keep trying to get him to promote what he's doing. He has he has a thing called the tea cult, where every week they drink tea and chat about stuff. He has a weekly book group. He does a talk every week. I didn't even know it, and I'm a close friend of his. He does all these things, and he just doesn't. He just has this pathological hatred of promoting anything he does. So when I heard that Pete Holmes mentioned them, I was like, brilliant.
Yep.
Someone's got to do it.
Yep. I hope they do, because I mean, when you hear like a profound statement and then there's a roadie for ACDC, it's just very fun. But yeah, it was cool. So you should check it out. Watch the special. It's fun.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. So brilliant. Will do. So
but yes,
this is where I'm kind of like, I think you can really make a case for freedom. Is the idea is that instead of these determinists who saying, oh, it's just a subjective illusion, if the subjective illusion has to be taken into consideration in order to understand reality, then, and coming back to your definition of freedom in the Webster Dictionary, is there's something that escapes necessity. There's something that escapes the web of cause and effect. And you cannot name it by definition, in the same way that as soon as you measure subatomic particles, as soon as you measure them, you crunch them into reality. So in other words, you cannot measure the potentiality. It's by definition, it's mathematically sound, but you cannot measure this realm of pure potentiality. Every time you measure it, you crunch it into being, into actual reality. In the same way, you cannot directly grasp this element of freedom. Every time you measure it, everything that you measure is in cause and effect. Everything all your consciousness, your ego, your sense of self, yeah. But at the same time, there is an eruption of a lack, which is called the unconscious in psychoanalysis. Right? There's an eruption of a kind of like a virtual bubbling of potentiality that defines who we are as human beings. I think you can make a good argument for that.
Are you familiar with the idea of systems theory? Or you heard of this?
Just a little bit. Some people have heard people talk about it.
Well, it's like because going back to the monism or the cause and effect that we don't have access to is, or whatever that you would say, like where it's a bigger thing that exists. We're in a bigger system, correct? Like the systems theory is basically you shouldn't be breaking things apart into their smallest things, but seeing rather how they behave as systems. So like the body is a system, the solar system is a system, the planet is a system, and when you can see things as systems, then the little things in the smaller parts are going to seem fractured, or they're going to seem chaotic, but they're all working within a bigger system. A hurricane is, filled with chaos, but it's still part of a bigger system of the weather that's moving around. And so is that kind of what you're saying? But because that sounds like the system is still, there's no subjectivity or fracture in it. It's just contains a fracture within a larger paradigm.
Yeah, so it depends. So like if systems theory is kind of saying that, once you look at larger objects, you have to look at them in and of themselves. Absolutely, I think that's totally right. And but what I'm saying is that every system has within it an exception, what can be called the real with a capital R. So I don't know if systems theory takes cognizance of that, but I'm arguing that every system has within it something that cannot be reduced to the system. There is an inductive dimension to reality, but which must be taken into consideration. That's the key. It's not just that we name this for shits and giggles. Like it's something that has to be taken into consideration. This is the very nature of the unconscious, is that like a lot of people don't believe the unconscious exists. But the idea is that, I would say that you have to take seriously that the unconscious, that there is a dimension of us that you cannot measure, that's not substantive, it's not like a dark part of the brain that you can find. It's literally a type of spontaneity, novelty, a type of contradiction, a type of lack that marks us.
Some people think it's like tied to language too. It's like, come on, man. It's insane. But yeah, the I like how you described that, Pete. That makes total sense, and I understand what it means in the most loose way you can imagine. Now, let's get into, because you mentioned this before earlier. This, well, I guess we kind of covered it. The experience of freedom, experiencing ourselves as freedom, and you're saying you are a philosopher of freedom. You're pro freedom. There is a negative, inconsistent thing that is in every system that is not complete, and the reason that you believe that is because the very act of talking about unity requires you to mention the division that the person feels and the unconscious as another example. Is that roughly?
Well, I would say, yeah, I'd say that basically, in
I didn't get it all, did I?
level, yeah, no, I think you did. It's just kind of like adding, say that at every level of like reality, there is a type of antagonism, and so at the level of physics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is kind of like is the name for it.
Yeah.
Mathematics, Gödel's incompleteness theorem is the name for it in mathematics. Evolutionary theory is the name for it in biology. So at every level, we find a type of antagonism, a productive antagonism, and the heart of that productive antagonism, I would say, is basically where freedom erupts. So I wouldn't say that we have freedom. I say that we are freedom. So I don't have freedom. Everything I do is conditioned by determinism, but I am freedom. Subjectivity is the eruption of a type of lack, sedimented.
It's like you sound, first of all, like a gospel song, which is beautiful right now, or like a new age. That almost sounds like the most new age thing I've ever heard you say, which is "We are freedom."
We are freedom. Yes, yeah.
That's like a presidential slogan. Like "No more malarkey." Remember that one?
Oh yes.
We are freedom, actually.
Well, and one of the examples I gave, it was weeks ago, and one of the other fundamentalists, this is from Zizek, but I was just trying to talk about kind of what the unconscious is. I said that Zizek used the example where he watches a movie, he watched this movie, and there was something missing, something wasn't great about it. He knew it was based on a book, so he went to read the book, and the book itself as well felt like there was something missing. So the movie pointed to the book, but the book also didn't feel complete. And so the two of them pointed to a third document, let's call it Q document, which was the complete document. Now that doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist in reality. It just comes into existence because of a failure of the movie and a failure of the book.
The what? The Q doc?
I called it a Q manuscript, but just because that's what they call the
Star Trek
manuscript that doesn't exist. Well, Q is interestingly what they call the guy in Star Trek as well, but they also there's a Q manuscript in biblical scholarship, which is a manuscript that doesn't exist, but they presuppose its existence.
Nice.
Yeah, so this Q document is, in my example, in the biblical sense, it probably did exist, but in this example, it doesn't exist, but it kind of insists. It is a gap that is opened up through the failure of reality. And again, that's what I kind of mean by a gap that is opened up in the world that's non-reducible to the world.
I love that this is how you explain the unconscious for people. So, like, if you're having a hard time understanding it, imagine a movie that leads you to read a book that leads you back to the movie that leads to a document from biblical scholarship that doesn't really exist, but it presupposes it exists, so it doesn't persist, it insists, and that's basically what the unconscious is.
That was perfectly said.
Thank you. Pretty good. It's not dark. It latches on. It's parasitic. It latches on to language and creates, as a result, proof of a wholeness that cannot be accessed, but a wholeness that is not whole, because if it was whole, we wouldn't have the experience of splitting it. But that's still to say that we are not experiencing freedom. We are itself the freedom. Vote for Peter Rollins, 2028.
Yes. Well said. Well said. That's what I think subjectivity is. The subject, not my ego, not consciousness, but the subject, the deepest sense of us, is this what could you call it? Is this antagonism that erupts and sediments in our actions and in the constructions around us. So you could say it like this: like the traditional definition of God, as in one of the traditional proofs of God, I should say, is that everything has a cause. So everything in the universe is a cause or an effect. And then Aquinas famously said there's one exception to this. We have to presuppose an uncaused cause, something that got the whole chain of cause and effect into motion, but is not itself part of that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the master signifier is. The master signifier is language requires two words. You can't have a language with one word because words point to other words. So the first language is presence and absence. That's why kids throw food off the table and get it put back on. Presence and absence. That's the first language, a proto-language, two signifiers.
Peekaboo.
Peekaboo, exactly. Peekaboo, presence and absence. And then basically so the first word in language is not a word. It's only when the second word arises that the first word retroactively becomes a word. So the first word is outside of the chain of cause and effect of signifiers. That's what the master signifier is. It weirdly says that there's one exception to the chain of language, and that one exception is the master signifier, which is, as I say, one of the early, proofs in inverted commas of the existence of God. That you have to presuppose one exception.
This had to start somewhere.
Had to start somewhere, but unlike Aquinas, I'm not saying that the beginning is outside of time. I'm saying that the beginning is inside. Yeah.
In the acquisition. I mean, I love the way you explain that. That's so fun. The first word, there's no word for it. It's only when you have the second one that the first one comes into existence. Is that basically what you're saying? Because you don't know what it is until you have something to say what it's not.
Exactly, to compare and contrast. So technically the first word of every infant and the first word of humanity was no. And interestingly, the Bible starts with that, like the prohibition, don't eat of the fruit. And the reason why the first word is no is because no, it doesn't tell you something. It's a prohibition. And then you have to define what is the prohibition. Then you have to work out what it is. So language arises to try to figure out what this prohibition means. So for infants, the first prohibition is the mother. You cannot stay with your mother. You have to separate. So there's a no, and then, but that's not really a signifier until other signifiers come in and try to interpret why am I not allowed to stay with the mother, and da 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 da. And so so the first word is not really a word. It's an exception.
That's fun. Okay, yeah, that's cool. All right.
It's very abstract. I was talking to somebody about this just before I came onto the podcast, and I was chatting to her about this stuff, and her eyes glazed over.
Yeah. Well, that's because you keep harassing the Starbucks barista. They're eventually going to stop listening to you. Sir, just take it. Just take your Frappuccino and get out of here with your extra whipped cream.
Can I say one actually thing? This is a side.
Please do. I'm enjoying this.
Okay. Just about a lot of people don't like the idea of predestination. That's the religious term for this. Predestination is no matter what you do, you're either damned to hell or you're going to heaven, right? There's nothing you can do. It's already done. It's predetermined. It's pre-decided. It's predestined. But this actually was a real moral advance. And very interesting because whenever you don't know if you're going to go to heaven or hell, you can try and be good in order to win the praise of God or to kind of get into heaven, right? So you do good acts selfishly. In order to be truly good, you have to act, Kant would say, non-pathologically. In other words, you do the good for no other reason than because it's the good, right? It's not a good act if you're just doing something because there's a gun to your head, right? If you give to the poor because someone's going to kill you if you don't, it's not it's not an ethical act. So it's only an ethical act if you give to the poor and you're not Instagramming it, you're not doing it for clicks, you're not doing it for likes, you just do it from your heart. So the idea is that if you accept predestination, then there's no reason to be good. There's just no reason, because it's been pre-decided whether you're going to go to heaven or hell, which frees you to be who you are. And so if you're good, you're not being good for any reason. You're just being good because you want to be good. So there was some sort of ethical advancement in taking out pathological motives by saying, hey, you're predestined to heaven or hell, so, nothing you can do to win God over. Okay. There's some interesting things.
Yeah, there's a because the question I have, and this we'll get into. You would probably, I think I know what you would say, but which leads to more actual good. Like, if you believe that, which one gets the food shelter built, and that's a utilitarian, right? That's a utilitarian stance. Like, which one's actually, yeah. But you're saying which is like the soul of the individual healthier, and the soul of the individual will be healthier in a situation where they're not frantically trying to do good things to ensure their own salvation, but rather doing good things because they just want to do it.
Yes, and that's it. That's it. So the utilitarian thinks that all ethical acts are ultimately pathological, and by pathological I just mean self-interested, maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain. Kant thinks that that the only ethical act is an act that is non-pathological, and then there's I'm more Kantian here. I think you can conceptualize an act that is not completely self-interested, but that takes a bit of time. We should do an episode on that sometime.
Yeah, it reminds me of but we can always revisit them. I mean, I forget everything I've ever said. I have been following loosely the drama from Mr. Beast, because he built 100 wells of water in Africa.
I heard about this. So I'll tell you what I heard, and I want to hear what happened. Did some people give him shit? That's what I heard. Yes. So yeah, give me the summation here. What went on?
I have not watched the video because I have a hard time watching Mr. Beast videos. They're not made for my sensibilities. But my understanding is he kind of called it. Mr. Beast figured out a very long time ago the perfect formula for success on YouTube, and has been doing it to the utmost ability for many years at this point. And he creates all these insane videos where he'll, like, one of them off the top of my head that I did see was he built an entire Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and then gives the chocolate factory to someone in the video, or says, hey, you can either have this chocolate factory and it's like a legit Willy Wonka chocolate factory that he spends all his money on, or because it's going to cost so much money to upkeep, you can have $500,000, and we'll give you the choice. And people usually take the $500,000. And so, but his editing style is different than what my brain can process. My processing speed's a little slower. But he also called this and was like, I know that I'm going to get crap for putting up these wells. And he did, and it was folks, my understanding is it was like an activist for, I don't know, Kenya maybe, but they were saying that it shed light poorly on these African countries because it implied that once again they need like handouts from like rich Americans, and it's like insulting basically. And a bunch of other people are like, well, they, Mr. Beast is like, they needed wells, so they got wells. And then there's the other side where he does all of these philanthropic videos. This is a whole like other channel that he does. And he does what, like, he, I think was like gave people hearing or something, like hearing surgery. He gave like 100 people hearing, like really insane, expensive stuff. And then the criticism is, of course, that he makes videos out of it, which generates money, which then goes back to funding the videos, I guess. But yeah, so that's what it was. It's that classic thing of like, oh, you're just doing it, the influencer thing, because you want to get hits. And then this is kind of a level up because there's like basically saying maybe you're being a little inappropriate or racist or something. But that's all I know about it.
Very interesting. Well, this is a good example, funnily enough, because the standard argument, which I think the Mr. Beast thing brings up, is, okay, are you doing this selfishly? You're doing this, it creates money, it creates clicks, or it makes you look good. What about doing the stuff behind closed doors? And there's that debate that we all know, and I can go back and forth on that. But interestingly, again, Freud was the one who really nailed this. He talked about the most interesting selfless act, not being like Mother Teresa, but being like, for example, well, he used like Lacan talks about the Marquis de Sade, but you could talk about it like say a capitalist who has made a huge amount of money. Um, Ayn Rand would say, well, this person is acting in their own self-interest. So a utilitarian kind of description. Okay, so this person wants money. They love money. They make lots of money. They've got 5 million. Then they've got 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, 500 million. But a kind of psychoanalytic view would be, well, there's a certain point at which this is a type of selflessness, but a zombie selflessness, because a zombie will continue to attack you even to its own detriment, even when its arms falling off and you've got a shotgun. And that actually, often there's people who are so caught up in making money that they live a miserable life. And they hurt their friends, they step on their friends, they don't spend enough time with family. And actually, if they were selfish, they would stop when they made 20 million. Right? They'd stop and they'd enjoy it, but they can't. And even their doctor's saying you're going to give yourself a heart attack. Your blood pressure's through the roof. You know, you're driving an old beat up car. You're not enjoying your money, and that's the Freudian insight in 1920 with Beyond the Pleasure Principle. This is when Freud became Freud and became a pessimist in a way. But he said that there is a death drive. There is a non-pathological dimension to us that is selfless, but not, as I say, in a good way, but selfless in a bad way, where we will maybe destroy our entire family just to sleep with somebody for a night, right? We'll do something so destructive, and we'll know it's destructive, and we'll know we're doing it for something so tiny, so inconsequential.
Yep.
The inconsequential dimension of it even adds to it, makes it even more exciting. And that again, that's my main way of critiquing utilitarianism, actually, is not by going, oh, there's Mother Teresa's out there who are doing good work. It's like pointing to loads of people out in the world, and Mr. Beast might be one of them. I don't know if he's made enough money. Why does he still do stupid YouTube videos? You know, it's like he potentially has been caught up in a type of destructive activity that doesn't make sense in terms of pleasure.
How much do you think he's worth?
Ooh, that's interesting. So I don't really know, but I'm guessing because he's one of the old school originals. Let me put him on 25 mil.
25 million. What if I told you, Pete, that Mr. Beast, as of who turned 25 in May 2023, he is worth a staggering $500 million.
Whoa.
He's got half, and that's because he makes so much money, dude. It is insane. And I do respect his ability to just not quit and also make so much money that he does all these outlandish videos. But anyway, I thought you'd find that interesting just because it's so much different than what you'd expect if you're not familiar with YouTubers or that kind of world. But it's a mind-boggling amount of money. Anyway. And
did we... Yeah, I don't know if we
Go
talked
ahead.
about this. I did talk about it in a podcast recently. I don't know if it was us, but the difference between what's called CMC and MCM in Marxism. So Marx famously said that CMC means commodity. So you make a commodity, I make a widget, and then I sell it, so I get money, so that I can buy another commodity, right? So that's generally how we do things in life. We make something, we go to work and we produce something, we get money, and then with that money we buy commodities that we want. But interestingly, what sometimes happens is that swaps around, and then what we have is we have money, and with the money we invest it to make a commodity, to sell, to get more money. And it's a very subtle difference, but now our desire is not for the things that money can buy, but for money itself. And so very quickly, and I see this within cryptocurrency, is people start to get obsessed not with the money and what it can buy, but just with having bigger and bigger numbers. So you start to desire abstract capital over what capital can buy. And I think once you move from, as I say, from CMC, which is commodity, money commodity, to AMCM, once you make that movement, it's very subtle, but you get caught up in this frenetic pursuit that is death drive. It just is from
Wow. Great.
more divorced from objects.
Fun. That's yeah, that's depressing but fun. I have not heard that. I don't think you've repeated that here. I didn't know about the maybe I forgot, but the MCM thing is very interesting. And it makes sense cuz it's on social media you can do it where you just become obsessive over the numbers, but the numbers aren't getting you anything directly, and you're not connecting that with real people. You're just like, I gotta look at the numbers, but then that can have a monetary tie, so it's a little.
But the crypto thing, I think it really works because there's those memes where somebody dies on a mattress in a shitty house when they're a millionaire, because they've never
Yep.
taken the money out. So I think even when I was in crypto a little bit, there was a point when it was doing really well, and you just got interested in it, the money getting more. It was kind of divorced from what you could do with it. So I never took it out, and then of course it all just disappeared as quickly as it appeared.
Yeah, it's me in Vegas. Money stops being real when I walk onto that casino floor, and I don't equate. I'll win $150 and be like, okay, well this just means I'm gonna gamble for longer. I'm gonna lose it. Not leaving this floor until I lose this money, and I can do it so quick. You've seen it.
I mean, that's it. Technically, even if you were winning and winning and winning, like once you get into gambling, it becomes divorced from
Yeah.
objects, divorced from what it can buy, and it becomes an obsession with capital itself. And someone like Mr. Beast, I don't think suffers from that because it sounds like he's getting enjoyment from other things. Whether they're good or not, I don't know. But he's potentially not getting enjoyment from making more money. Maybe he's starting to try to get enjoyment from helping people. Maybe he's transitioning. I don't know. But
I don't know. He's I think working himself to a bloody stump, basically, is what I've heard. He's definitely got that like workaholic thing, but he's at the age where that's what you do, and it's great. Good for him. I got no negative things to say about the guy because I don't know enough to, but I also can't watch his videos physically. You should check out some of his videos. It is fascinating. As a side note, you should, when we're done, go like just pick any one of his videos, look at the thumbnails that he does. There's like a brilliance behind his thumbnails. He knows exactly what he's doing, and click on any of them, and it's like you can't. I think it's like a different frame every like half second or third second because he knows that his audience. He knows his audience, and he knows his audience doesn't want to sit and watch something, so he's got to keep constantly like. It's nuts. It's like ADHD videos that are hypnotic, I guess.
yeah, that's fine. But here, the one thing then I'll say as a thought, and then that'll be me, is that interestingly, we find it a commonsensical to think that we're selfish and to think that we're doing stuff for selfish reasons. It is interesting to ask oneself if actually there is a type of zombie selflessness behind some of our actions. Like if you're giving yourself working 120 hours a week at a job to make a certain amount of money, and you think, well, I'm being self-interested. It will be interesting to ask yourself, am I actually being self-interested, or am I being self-destructive? Am I being selfless in a very perverse way? And even asking yourself that question can shift something in you, and then you can go, maybe if I was a bit more selfish, I'd actually give up this job. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I like that. That's a great point. Anything else, Pete? Any other notes on freedom, free will?
no, I'm good, and I like the whole point I was trying to make is this idea that the typical argument is I have free will, I don't have free will. This third position is in this dialectic affirmation negation, and this negation of negation, you go from I have free will, I don't have free will is just an illusion, to the idea that this illusion is actually real. This illusion is something that is part of reality, and we have to take it seriously. So if
Yes.
that from this, that's all I'm trying to say.
I like that very much. You could have just said that at the beginning, though. You know that? You could have just said it in the beginning, Pete. Thank you, everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed that, Pete. I don't have anything to. I feel like this is a rich enough episode. I was just trying to add a little zest and a little sex appeal. But thank you, everyone. We should have some bonus episodes available pretty soon because we're on such a roll. So if you guys are interested in those, they'll be available at patreon.com/thefundamentalists. But of course, don't worry about it if not. And if you also would like to leave us a review on iTunes or check us out wherever podcasts are available, and check out Peter at peterrollins.com, and you can check me out just when you see me walking down the street. Thanks, everybody.
See you later. Bye.